All right, we only have a half an hour, so I'm going to jump right into this. Let's see. So my name is Jesse Streb. I'm a developer at Brightcove, currently working on the App Cloud team. And today I'm going to be talking about building native applications with HTML5. So I've got a quick show of hands. Who here has any experience building any mobile applications, whether it's HTML5 or great, good. All right. First thing to do, we are actually going to try to have a piece of code at the end that we're going to go through together. One thing that App Cloud does have is something we call the workshop, so you'll be able to follow along. If you want to, you can pull out your iPhones or Androids and actually install it. It's a free app, either the Android Marketplace or the App Store. And then when we start looking at code together, you can just follow along if you choose to. So if you just search for Brightcove App Cloud workshop, you'll find it. So what are we going to talk about today? So I like to think of 2011 as the rise of hybrid, and I'll go into what I mean by that in a few minutes. Go look at some of the challenges with HTML5 and building these types of applications. The landscape of the different UI frameworks out there to help us overcome some of these challenges. And then also some containers, so you can actually deploy these applications to the different app stores and be able to actually have access to the device itself. And finally, we'll look at App Cloud and jQuery mobile in action. And I promise this is not going to be a sales pitch for App Cloud. It's just a great way to demo code. So 2011, the rise of hybrids. So when we started building App Cloud out in about mid-2010, everyone was talking about how HTML5 was the future. But it wasn't entirely clear. There wasn't really anyone that was out there truly building and deploying these applications. You had a handful of people, but it wasn't really there yet. I like to think that 2011 has really had us actually rise those hybrids out. And what I mean by a hybrid application is an application that is going to be having a native container, but really the guts of it is HTML. So on the bottom here, that tab bar can be native code, but inside of it, everything you see here is HTML. And the reason that this is really advantageous is the fact that you can then have a single code base. We've heard a lot about this today, and it makes it so you don't have Objective-C code and Java code, two different teams working on it, different feature sets. It just makes a maintenance nightmare. So this promise of having a single code base has been around for a long time, and I think for the first time we're really seeing it, and we're really seeing these hybrid applications. It's what has finally allowed these companies to do that. And I think the proof is actually out there now. In 2011, we've seen a ton of these quote-unquote hybrid applications go live and be tremendously successful, and they've really proven out this market that it's a fantastic path to go, and I think the recommended path to go at this point. So let's just take a look at a couple of those applications that are there today. So the first is Netflix. They really kicked it off. They've been around for a long time, are kind of the gold standard. They were able to, if you look at almost any device, they're deployed on it, and they have a working example. And I think a lot of that, you have to give credit to the fact that they built it out in HTML5. And for a long time, when we were really pushing this, saying this is going to be the way to go, we used Netflix as kind of the example, being like, look, they're doing it. Look how successful they're being with this. They're on every single device because of this. But they were kind of the exception to the rule. But in the last, I'd say even 3 months, we've seen a couple really big deploys happen. So you have LinkedIn. Much of their app is powered by HTML5. They're pretty vocal about that. And to be honest, if they didn't say that a lot of this was built in HTML5, you'd have no idea. And I think that's the whole point of the end user is that they can't tell a difference. But you as an organization, you can now really maintain your code. You have a single code base, and you get across all these different applications. So if you take a look at the LinkedIn application that you install on your phone, and then you look at just the touch.linkedin.com, you'll notice it's very, very similar. Another one that's very new is the new release for Facebook. And so they've been talking about this Project Spartan for a while. And it's really coming out. And it's a beautiful application. Some new cool UI conventions that you can do because it's HTML5. You're no longer tied to a lot of those native containers we've been seeing over and over again for so long. You get to really explore. And they're doing a great job with it. I mean, if you look at the iPad, the same idea. They've been holding out for a long time. Their CTO has been saying for so long that HTML5 is the future, but he really believed it and pushed it through. There are still some bugs because there's a lot of challenges, but I think that we'll see those all get worked out. So let's talk about some of those mobile challenges. So the first is probably data connection. So if you're coming from just pure web development, you haven't been as concerned about data connections. So things that you used to take for granted as kind of best practices, whether it's minifying all your CSS and JS into one file and delivering that, or using sprites, it's not really a best practice anymore as much as a necessity. Because every single bit really counts. So that's the first time that you really have to focus on that. Additionally, you also have this idea of offline mode. So in the past, when you're on web development, you don't have an offline mode. You just can't get to that site. So now you've got to take advantage of things like manifest cache file, using local storage, so your user actually has an offline experience. And CPU power is low, or relatively low to what our desktops can do at this point. And this kind of plays out, at least in my experience did, where when I first jumped into it, I was like, great. This was like early 2010. I was like, start trying to do some JavaScript animations, and it looked dog slow. And so you have to take advantage of what the phone gives you. Fortunately, they've exposed a lot of the hardware acceleration, so you can use the CSS transforms and transitions to take advantage of that. But you have to be aware now of everything that's using up your CPU. Like even just making a data request, using that process to fetch that data has a pretty big impact and a meaningful one. So you've got to be very conscious of it. Small amount of memory. So at least on iOS, they have a memory buffer of 1024 by 1024 if you're doing any sort of transforms. And this will play out where you'll start seeing this flickering happen. And if anyone's been playing around with all these transforms, it's probably plagued them. And it's pretty awful. To get around it, you can do a translate 3D, which basically tells the browser that you want to load this into doing a 3D transformation. But that has a really terrible side effect of loading it and keeping it in memory. There's a reason that the browser wants to unload that. And so you can lead to crashes there. So it's something to be mindful of when you play with it, but a great way to get around some of these flickering that you might see. Additionally, you have images. So there's an image cap of how many images that it'll allow you to download. And after you hit that cap, it'll either stop loading those images or it'll actually just crash. So got to be mindful of your memory. For me, when coming from web development, I probably had one large app where I was actually concerned how much memory I was using, so it was a pretty big transition. Fixed headers and scrolling I won't go too much into, but you don't have position fixed, or you didn't until the iOS 5 release on iOS, and on Android, anything below 2.2. So you've seen a lot of these solutions where you're trying to do actually scrolling yourself to mimic momentum scrolling, and they're doing that through all these CSS translates. So there's a lot of heavy lifting to make it look like a native application, and it's definitely a pretty meaningful challenge. You have different resolutions and DPIs you got to take care of now, or be mindful of. You don't want to load up these huge images if you're running on like an iPhone 3G that only has 320 pixels. So you're going to have different images for an iPhone 3G versus an iPhone 4. So having something that can do image transcoding for you server side becomes pretty important, so you're not transferring those data, all the bits across the wire, and you're also not using up CPU to resize them. And responsive design, it's becoming really in vogue these days. I think Boston Globe has definitely become the gold standard for that. But when you're doing mobile development, it's required. You have orientation changes. If you're on an iPad, you're probably going to change the look and feel of that at that time. And you've got to be really coding these things to what we call liquid layouts, where it's going to be expanding to fill up the entire screen that you have. So it's a little different if you're coming from web development. So after all these things, I usually kind of felt like this after the first 2 months of me working on this. But fortunately, there's a bunch of tools out there to help aid in this. A quick look at some of the frameworks and libraries that can help. We have jQuery Mobile, Sencha Touch, Joe, Kendo UI, Zepto.js. You can read the list. I'm not going to dive into all these. In my opinion, I think there's really 3 things that are leading this pack. I think jQuery Mobile, Sencha Touch, and then what I like to call, or people call micro frameworks, and just kind of piecing it together. I think are kind of the 3 best solutions, but Joe and Kendo UI, who knows, maybe they'll take off, so we'll see. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into jQuery Mobile. So jQuery Mobile, they take the stance of they give you a bunch of HTML and then use progressive enhancement to change that UI based off the different device that you're on. So even if you're on just a feature phone, it's going to work. You're going to see some HTML, and as you get a better and better phone, you have a better and better experience. It's really quick to get up and running on. It's very familiar if you've been used to using jQuery, and you have a huge range of devices that you're going to be able to run on. And so if you are taking your existing site and you want to make it work on mobile, in my opinion, jQuery Mobile is hands down the way to go. If you want to be deploying into a native application, that's not as clear to me. It doesn't ever really feel native. They don't have that idea of momentum scrolling. You can tell from the look of most of these applications that it looks like jQuery Mobile. Granted, you can override the CSS, but that's a lot of the value they actually add there. But there's a lot of solutions out there. Actually, with App Cloud, we're deploying an iPad state application on the iPad that uses jQuery mobile and iScroll. Sencha Touch, they do a fantastic job of making their UIs really look like native components themselves. They really helped push along HTML5. Like we'd started working on App Cloud, and then they launched, and they just, I don't know if you guys remember this, they were walking around in the robes being like the end of native and everything like that at the WWC. But there's a little bit more of a learning curve. If you've never used them before, it's all JavaScript based, so you're going to be basically piecing together your application through APIs. And it's built on top of ext.js, which some people love and some people seem to hate. But it's a fantastic option and definitely worth checking out. And then the third option is these micro frameworks. And so in this case, what you're really going to be doing is you're going to be piecing together what you need. And this is a great option for mobile because you're so sensitive how much data you're pulling down and how fast your code is that a lot of my own personal projects, I end up just using a lot of these micro frameworks. To call it a few, you have zepto.js, which basically is jQuery, but just for WebKit. And so it's incredibly small, lightweight, but very friendly to code in. They also give you a little bit of animation and things like that. This is also going to be a lot of what we're going to look at is what LinkedIn used to build their application. So they did use Zepto. I think it's great to have some sort of templating engine, especially if you're going to be building one of these web apps where you have a just one single page and you have all these different views. It can become very cumbersome to have a bunch of all this markup inside your JavaScript. My personal favorites are Mustache and one that my colleague wrote, Adam Mark, which we will take a look at later in code. And then, again, Backbone.js is a great way to go. Just allows you to organize your code. And again, I believe this is what LinkedIn used as part of this. And just, again, if you have all those views, it almost becomes a necessity to have that to be able to organize your code in a meaningful way. And the last is iScroll. So there's like iScroll and scrollability are two of the big classes that give you that momentum scrolling. There's a ton of stuff there like pull to refresh, doing carousels. It's pretty powerful. It's an ongoing debate inside our company. Some people love it, some people hate it, and have decided to try to roll their own. And so the nice thing is you got to actually deploy this to the App Store itself. And so there's a couple options for native containers. But basically what you're looking for in a native container is the ability to compile this to the devices that you're targeting. And it's going to also give you some sort of API to be able to talk to the capabilities of that device that you can't normally get through the browser. So things like getting access to the camera, being able to notify someone through something like a vibrate. And so, big one, PhoneGap. Who here has heard of PhoneGap? Yep. And they work on a huge variety of phones. They have pretty much every device out there they currently support. It is open source. They just went under the Apache license. The company that wrote this, Nitobi, was I think it was last week, was actually acquired by Adobe. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. You have Appcelerator, which I think we've heard a little bit about today, also referred to as Titanium. They're a little bit different in the sense that they have a bunch of JavaScript APIs that compile down to native code, so you get some great performance. But again, it's going to be the same idea where it's deploying into this native container. Then the third option that we're going to look at today is App Cloud. And so again, we have a similar approach, probably more to PhoneGap, where we have a container. We do provide a little bit more. We also have basically some native navigation, and we do that because what we do is we break up each of those sections into its own page, and we do that for code reusability and also maintenance. It's just a lot easier if you have it all sectioned off, so each thing in the tab bar corresponds to an HTML page, but you're not restricted to that. You can turn off that native navigation if you choose to. So we're doing great on time. Let's take a look at App Cloud and jQuery Mobile in action. If you've had a chance to install the workshop on your phone, hopefully you'll be able to follow along. You may have to, if you're in anything past the fourth row, I found that I actually had to type in the URL. So let's see. So who here has the workshop installed at this point? Anyone? Some people? Okay. If you scan this QR code, I might be able to scan it. If you bring up the workshop, there'll be a little camera there, and you should be able to scan that QR code, and it'll actually load up our application. So All right, and then if you can't scan it, like I said, if you're past the fourth row, there is actually, you can also type in this bit.ly URL, which will allow you to actually also load up that manifest file. Is that working for everyone or anyone? Worked? Okay, that's good. That's got one person. All right, well, let's take a look at some code then. If anyone wants me to bring this scan back up so you can get the manifest file, just let me know, and I'm happy to do so. So we're going to start off with a very simple example. We're literally just going to create our de facto hello world. So this is what is comprised of an App Cloud application. You're going to have, oh, yes. That's right. I don't know why my shortcut's not working. Let me know when it's big enough. Will this will work? No, that didn't work either. Command plus. Yeah, I'm hitting the Command plus, and it's just not doing it. It's saying no errors, actually, to me, which is not helpful. One more? Are you guys good? No? Okay. All right. Is that big enough? Yep? Okay. So really what you're looking at is just a really simple HTML page, some meta tags to make it look somewhat decent on a device. And then you also have a manifest JSON file. And this is what our workshop's actually reading in. And when we deploy our apps, also what our containers read in. And all we're looking at here is we're actually loading up we're just pointing to our HTML file. These are our different views. And this is going to correspond to that native tab bar that you see at the bottom. And then here is where we can turn that on and off if we choose to. So if I look in here, you should see hey everyone. So that's it. You're already off. You could zip this up into our studio, hit publish, and you'd have an app in both Android and iPhones in the App Store. But it's obviously not that interesting yet. So let's go on to step 2. So I'm not doing live coding because I'm not that brave, but I do have a bunch of branches that we can check out through Git and walk through this together. So what we're doing here is we're now actually introducing some JavaScript, and we're actually going to start loading in some data. And so what the App Cloud does is our BCN event fires when our device is ready. It's kind of similar to PhoneGap's device ready. And also, the document ready is also fired for jQuery. So at that point, we are free to interact with our DOM and also interact with the device. BC core get data is just part of our APIs to actually go and fetch data. We have a data services layer, so you can input your XML or JSON, whatever you choose to do. And we'll actually change it to JSON delivered to your phone. And so you don't have to worry about any sort of cross-domain issues or anything like that. And you can also optimize it so you get gzipped and pull out any fields you're not using. What we're doing here, and I'm happy to show you in the studio later if you're interested in seeing it, we're actually pulling in a schedule feed that I got from everyone here at JS Everywhere so that we can actually see the schedule. And then we're just going to call a render function when we get that out and just build up some snippets of HTML and render it into our HTML. So we just have this class of schedule container. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like. Getting some data back. Getting some data back. See, this is why I use Git, so I don't have to have that problem. All right, I'm going to go to step 4 and see if that fixed itself, and if not, we will code it together. Or step 3. Okay. I'm assuming that's not working for anyone else either. Sorry, everyone, just give me 1 second. Okay. That's okay. That's okay, but I appreciate that. I'm not getting data back, so let's take a quick look. Maybe we'll set up a new data feed. I wasn't going to try to show you guys this, but This would be a great step to do. That looks like my problem. I'm going to turn this off. Or maybe I'll go to Wi-Fi, actually. I'm going to go to Wi-Fi. Who knew? Yeah, I was trying to use the wired one. OK. All right, look at that. Whew. I was worried our servers were down, was really what was going through my head. I was getting really nervous. We just did a big deploy yesterday, so. All right, so, well, we jumped right into adding in jQuery mobile, but if you want to bear with me for 2 seconds, I will just show you what this looked like before you add in jQuery mobile, because it's amazing how quickly you can make something look halfway decent. So without jQuery mobile, you just have an unordered list, not that exciting. And then with it, or if we look in our browser now, you can see, you can actually see it showing up pretty nicely. So let's look at what we did to change that. So jQuery mobile uses this idea of data roles that they then use progressive enhancement to make it nicer. So you have a data role of page here, data role of header, which is basically going to style it to give us that nice looking header. And then there's also this data role of list view. And so that basically makes it look like a true list view. And then in our JavaScript, it's pretty straightforward. All we're doing now is that when we re-render our HTML down here, we just have to call list view refresh and presto. And that's because we're just changing the DOM out from under them. So they need to be aware of it so they can do their progressive enhancement on that again. All right, so let's see what we got in step 5, or step 4. So in step 4, we're going to go ahead and actually run out in a detail page now. So far we've just been looking at kind of this, really 5 minutes? All right, we're going to do this fast. Here we go. So we're going to load in a new detail page, and then we're going to transition to that. I've also added in templates at this point because now we're kind of doing a lot more markup, and so, or a little bit more markup. And so what our JavaScript looks like now is we just do this markup, BC templates, schedule, list, and I pass in my data. It's kind of similar to any other templating engine you've seen, but I really like markup. It's got these great pipes and things like that. Worth checking out if you haven't checked it out before. And now when we actually click on one of our LIs, we're going to populate our detail page, and then jQuery mobile is going to handle transitioning to it for us automatically. So if you have your workshop, you can just refresh the page. Otherwise, I will just go in here and do it, and you can come over, and you actually see it. Now, I'm sure you're wondering at this point, like, great, this looks a lot like just a mobile website to me. Why do I need to actually have any sort of containers? So let's fix that. So we're going to jump to 6, show you both things at once. And so what we're doing here is we're actually going to add in a check-in button. So when you click check-in, we're going to store to our cache. So App Cloud also provides a layer so you can cache the different information where you need to. And then we're also going to give them a little vibrate so that they are aware that something happened. And so just to show you how easy that is, right here is where we're actually going to tell the phone to vibrate. So we're just going to literally say BC device vibrate. It's going to vibrate the phone for us. And then that BC core cache is where we're storing the different sessions that we went to for that day. This is not actually running in the container. You can tell that I'm running just in Safari. And so what you'll see instead when you check in is just our mobile version of it. So we give it a little shake. But if you have the workshop, or you'd like to see the workshop later, you'll actually feel the vibrate happen. And then the last page that we have with that is a photos page. Because again, it's not that exciting unless you take a picture. So again, if we look at, I had to have some sort of entertaining image at the end of the day like this, right? So if you look in here, I'm just putting it all into this JavaScript. A lot of nice callbacks, as you can see. But all we're doing here is, again, it's super simple. You just say BC device take photo, pass in your success error handler, and what's going to come back is that image data. And you can just set the image source for you. Or if you get an error back, then you can handle that however gracefully you want. So again, if you have the workshop, go ahead, refresh it, take a picture, and you'll see it actually get replaced in your device. And here, because I'm not running in a native container, when I take a picture, I get my error message that there's no camera available to this device because I'm not running in native mode. And so I just put my error image in there instead. So I think, am I doing OK? Is it time for questions? It's time for questions then. There is a step 7. I put this all up on GitHub, so feel free to check out the code if you want. And the step 7, all we're doing is adding some list dividers to make it look a little bit nicer and just show you how easy that is to do with jQuery mobile. So any questions? We did make, by the way, an hour-long presentation into 30 minutes, so nice work, everyone. And if you could actually understand what I'm saying, because I spoke fast, I'm also impressed. So.
Where's the native portion of it, like the native package app version right there?
There is. So the workshop that you're looking at is the exact same code base of what will happen when you do the container. And so literally it's the exact same code. And then if you guys want to bear, I can show you this afterwards, but you would log into our studio. You zip up your files just as is. You upload it, and you now have what we call a template. And so now it's really good for companies, any agencies or company that wants to make a bunch of apps, because you can go and style that, set different settings. These are things we didn't touch upon. Change your data, so you just describe the data you need, and you can do that all in our studio and publish it out. And it's the exact same container as what we saw in our workshop.
So when you say publish it out,
yep.
So if I create an App Cloud app,
yep.
How does my app go to the App Store?
Yep. So we will take you through the steps of publishing it. So you're going to upload the different certificate files that you need, and then you download the IPA file that you can submit at the end. We don't submit it on your behalf just because it gets really messy when you do like in-app purchases and things like that. So they also don't like it. Yes?
Just a quick question. The session stuff that you were showing there, is that something that's when you were saying you're storing data, that's local to the device, not like your servers or something?
Yeah, no, that is local to the device. Yeah. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't push it up to a server, but we're kind of more pulling content in. Any other questions? All right. Just made it. All right, feel free to grab me if you guys have any questions otherwise. Also, Adam Mark, who's our developer advocate, is sitting back there too, so you can ask him questions also. And he actually has cards, unlike me. All right. Thanks, everyone.